In a ballroom dripping with diamonds and disdain, a billionaire's cruel dare was about to backfire spectacularly. He thought he was making a fool of a young waitress, a ghost serving champagne to the city's elite. What he didn't know was that he was challenging a queen in hiding. This is the story of how one woman's hidden talent turned a moment of public humiliation into a legend that would echo far beyond those gilded walls. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing our global audience. Maya Park moved through the chaos with the practiced invisibility of a ghost. Her world was a blur of outstretched hands, empty glasses, and the polite, dismissive murmurs of the city's elite. The weight of the silver tray she carried was a familiar ache in her wrist, a grounding sensation in a room that felt untethered from reality. Each step on the plush, crimson carpet was measured, her black uniform a stark contrast to the jewel-toned gowns and bespoke suits that surrounded her. She was a shadow in a world of blinding light. The St. Regis Grand Ballroom was a masterpiece of Gilded Age opulence. Its soaring ceiling was adorned with frescoes of mythical figures dancing in celestial clouds, and the chandeliers, each a constellation of hand-cut crystal, cast a warm, honeyed glow over the assembled guests. Laughter, brittle and sharp, echoed off the marble columns as conversations ebbed and flowed, a symphony of stock options, summer yachts, and political connections. Maya heard it all, but none of it was for her. Her job was to anticipate a need before it was voiced, to be a silent, efficient cog in the grand machine of the evening. Yet, even in her self-imposed anonymity, there was a grace to her movements that belied her station. When she navigated a tight space between two gossiping socialites, her body didn't just squeeze through, it flowed, her shoulders angling with an unconscious elegance. As she set down a flute of champagne, her fingers didn't just release the glass, they extended with a delicate precision, a subtle flourish that went unnoticed by everyone, but was ingrained in her muscle memory. It was the ghost of a different life, a life where her movements were not for service, but for art. Years ago, those same muscles had been trained for the ocho, the giro, the dramatic pause of a tango. She and her partner, Marco, had been rising stars in the competitive dance world, their chemistry on the floor a fiery, unspoken language. They had dreamed of Buenos Aires, of winning the Mundial de Tango, of a life lived in the passionate embrace of the music. But dreams were fragile things, easily shattered by the harsh realities of life. Her mother's illness, the mountain of medical bills, and Marco's decision to find a partner with better financial prospects had brought her world crashing down. The dance shoes were packed away, the posters of tango legends taken down, and the fire in her soul banked to a low, smoldering ember. Survival had become the only dance that mattered. A sudden, sharp voice cut through her reverie. "Waitress, over here." Maya turned, her face a mask of polite neutrality. A man with a florid face and a strained tuxedo gestured impatiently. "Another round for the table, and be quick about it." "Of course, sir," she murmured, collecting the empty glasses. She didn't look him in the eye. Eye contact invited conversation, and conversation led to questions. She had learned early on that people like this didn't want to see the person behind the uniform. They wanted a function, a service, a pair of hands. To them, she was no different from the silver tray she carried. As she made her way back to the service station, she passed the small stage where a pianist, a man with kind eyes and silver hair named Mr. Romano, played a gentle, meandering melody. His music was the soul of the evening, a warm current beneath the chilly surface of the crowd's chatter. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, a silent recognition of one artist to another, though he couldn't possibly know her secret. Maya felt a strange pang in her chest, a flicker of the girl she used to be. She loaded her tray with fresh glasses, the clinking sound a stark rhythm against the pianist's soft chords. As she turned to re-enter the fray, her gaze was drawn to the center of the room. A circle had formed, and at its heart was Marcus Mercer. She recognized him from the society pages, a young, brutally successful investor known for his Midas touch in the markets and his callous treatment of those he deemed beneath him. He was handsome in a severe, sculpted way, with eyes the color of ice and a smirk that seemed permanently etched onto his lips. He held court, his voice a confident baritone that sliced through the ambient noise, his friends hanging on his every word, their laughter a chorus of sycophants. Maya instinctively steered clear of his orbit. Men like Marcus Mercer were black holes, their gravity immense and destructive. They consumed everything around them, leaving a void in their wake. She had seen it before, the casual cruelty, the dismissal of others as mere props in the grand theater of their own lives. Her focus narrowed to her task: deliver the drinks, retrieve the empties, and fade back into the wallpaper. It was a simple mantra, a shield against the indignity of her position. But as she approached the table near Mercer's circle, she couldn't help but overhear his bored, cutting words, and she felt a cold premonition snake its way up her spine. The night was about to change. The ghost in the ballroom was about to be seen. Marcus Mercer was profoundly, exquisitely bored. He leaned against a marble pillar, a glass of vintage scotch swirling in his hand, the amber liquid catching the light like a trapped sunset. The gala, with its predictable pageantry and recycled conversations, felt less like a celebration and more like a cage. A gilded, exquisitely decorated cage, but a cage nonetheless. He saw the same faces he saw at every other charity function, heard the same insipid flattery, and felt the same gnawing emptiness that wealth had failed to fill. The deal for the Argentinian solar firm is a lock, his friend, a sycophantic hedge fund manager named Leo, was saying. You played it perfectly, Marcus. A masterstroke. Marcus offered a non-committal shrug. It was obvious. Their CEO was desperate. Desperation is a currency, I understand. He took a slow sip of his scotch, the smoky peat flavor doing little to quell his restlessness. He surveyed the room, his icy gaze sweeping over the preening guests. He saw them not as people, but as assets and liabilities. The mayor, schmoozing by the bar, an asset. The aging heiress with her third facelift, a liability. It was a game, a simple calculation of power and influence, and he had mastered it. But winning a game you designed was, in the end, a hollow victory. He was looking for a disruption, a crack in the polished veneer of the evening. His eyes scanned past the clusters of designer gowns and settled, for a moment, on one of the waitstaff. A young woman, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, moved with an unusual fluidity. There was a precision in her posture, a control in her movements that seemed out of place with her menial task. She was just another prop, yet something about her, her quiet dignity, her complete lack of interest in the spectacle around her, pricked at his ego. She was in his world, but not of it, and that, to Marcus, felt like a small act of rebellion. Look at them, he said, a note of contempt creeping into his voice. He gestured vaguely with his glass toward the catering staff moving along the perimeter. They move through this world, serve us our food, our drinks, but they'll never be a part of it. They're just scenery. Well, someone has to pour the champagne, another friend, Chloe, chimed in, her laughter tinkling like ice in a glass. But do they have to be so bland? Marcus countered, his boredom now curdling into a specific, targeted irritation. His gaze fell back on Maya as she placed a drink on a nearby table. There's no spark, no ambition. They just exist. The idea began to form in his mind. a casual, cruel whim born of immense privilege and a desperate need for entertainment. He wanted to provoke a reaction, to shatter the placid surface of the night and remind everyone, including himself, of the power he wielded. He could make things happen. He could turn a person into a spectacle. He pushed himself off the pillar and strolled toward the center of the room, his friends trailing behind him like pilot fish. His voice, deliberately loud, cut through the surrounding conversations, causing a ripple of attention to spread outward. "I'm bored," he announced, a theatrical sigh in his voice. "This party needs something real, something authentic." He picked up an unused place card from a table, folding it neatly in half. He held it up, catching the light. It looked like a betting slip, a proclamation. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room and landed directly on Maya, who was just turning away from a table, her tray now empty. She was on her way back to the kitchens, back to the invisibility he so disdained. He wouldn't allow it. "You," he called out, his voice booming with artificial authority. Maya froze, her back to him. She hoped for a split second that he was addressing someone else, anyone else. But the sudden quiet that descended on their section of the ballroom told her otherwise. Slowly, she turned, her face impassive, her hands clasped behind her back. Marcus's smirk widened. He saw her now, not as a ghost, but as a target. He saw the flicker of apprehension in her eyes, and it thrilled him. This was the disruption he had been craving. He was about to stage a play, and he had just found his unwilling star. The king of the gilded cage was about to rattle the bars, not to escape, but to prove that everyone and everything inside was his to command. He relished the feeling of control, the power to turn a human being into a diversion. A brief, amusing anecdote for the ride home. The silence that had fallen around Marcus Mercer's circle began to expand, a pool of quiet spreading across the ballroom floor. Heads turned, conversations faltered. The gentle melody from Mr. Romano's piano seemed to hang in the air, suddenly exposed and fragile. Everyone was watching. Maya stood rooted to the spot, the collective gaze of the room, a physical weight pressing down on her. Marcus's eyes were locked on hers, a predatory gleam in their icy depths. He took a deliberate step closer, holding up the folded place card as if it were a royal decree. The small crowd of his friends parted for him, their faces a mixture of sycophantic amusement and mild curiosity. "You," he repeated, his voice dripping with condescension. "You walk through here as if you're made of glass, as if you don't want to be seen. I think it's because you know you don't belong here." A nervous titter ran through his entourage. Maya's jaw tightened, but her expression remained a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. She had faced worse than a rich man's ego. She had held her mother's hand as she faded away, had packed her dreams into a cardboard box, had learned to survive on the scraps of a life that was supposed to be so much more. His words were just noise. "But," Marcus continued, raising his voice for dramatic effect, "I believe in opportunity. I'm a philanthropist, after all." He gestured grandly at the gala around them. "So, I'm going to give you a chance to prove you have a spark of life in you." He paused, letting the suspense build. He was a showman, and the ballroom was his stage. He looked directly at Maya, his smirk twisting into a cruel, challenging grin. "I will make you a proposal," he boomed, ensuring everyone within earshot could hear. "Right here, right now. Forget the canapes and the champagne. I want you to dance the tango." A wave of confused murmur swept through the onlookers. Tango? Why tango? It was so specific, so random. Marcus's eyes glinted. He had no idea if she could dance. That wasn't the point. The point was the impossibility, the humiliation of the demand. He was asking a waitress, a nobody, to perform for her supper in the most extravagant way imaginable. The murmurs swelled into disbelieving laughter. Leo, his friend, guffawed loudly. "The tango, Marcus. Where did that come from?" "It's a dance of passion," Marcus said, his gaze never leaving Maya. "I want to see if there's any passion behind that blank little uniform. So here's the dare." He brandished the place card. "Dance the tango for us, right now. And if you can do it, if you can show this room and me a single moment of genuine, breathtaking art, I'll marry you." The laughter that erupted this time was a tidal wave. It was loud, unrestrained, and deeply cruel. The proposal wasn't real. It was a punchline. He wasn't offering her a future. He was offering her ridicule. He was turning her into a joke, a piece of live entertainment for his jaded friends. The idea was absurd. The billionaire and the waitress, bound by a dance. It was a fairy tale twisted into a mockery. Humiliation, hot and sharp, pierced through Maya's carefully constructed armor. Her cheeks burned. She could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on her, dissecting her, judging her. The laughter was a physical assault, each peal a small stone thrown at her dignity. Her first instinct was to flee, to turn and walk away, head held high, and disappear back into the kitchens. She could quit on the spot. She could melt back into the shadows and forget this ever happened. It was the sensible thing to do, the self-preservation she had honed over years of hardship. But then, something else stirred within her. A deep, dormant anger. He had, by sheer cruel coincidence, chosen the one thing that had once defined her. The tango. Her art. Her soul. He was using it as a weapon to mock her, to put her in her place. He thought it was an impossible task, a random, demeaning command. He had no idea that he had just handed her a sword. The laughter began to subside, replaced by an expectant hush. What would the waitress do? Would she cry? Would she run? The moment stretched, thick with tension. Maya's eyes flickered from Marcus's smug face to the pitying and amused expressions of the crowd. Then, she looked toward the stage, where Mr. Romano, the pianist, was watching her with an intense, curious expression. He had stopped playing. Her mind was a battlefield. The sensible part of her screamed to escape. "Don't give them the show they want. Don't let them break you." But another voice, a voice she hadn't heard in years, whispered from a place of deep, wounded pride. "This is not his to tarnish. This is yours. Show them." The muscle memory in her calves, in the arch of her foot, in the line of her spine, began to call to her. The phantom sensation of a partner's hand on her back, the memory of the music swelling, the feeling of commanding a floor. It was all there, buried, but not gone. He thought he was mocking her with the tango. But the tango was her home. Slowly, deliberately, Maya unclasped her hands. She took a step forward, her eyes finding the empty silver tray she had left on a nearby service stand. With a calm, measured movement, she walked over and set it down. The simple, metallic clink echoed in the silent room. It was a sound of decision, a sound of acceptance. She turned back to face the center of the floor. She wasn't fleeing. She was stepping forward. The moment Maya set down the tray, a profound shift occurred in the ballroom's atmosphere. The residual snickers died in people's throats, replaced by a collective, held breath. Her simple action was not one of subservience, but of declaration. It was the shedding of a skin, the quiet, deliberate removal of the uniform's symbolic weight. She was no longer a waitress. In that single, silent gesture, she had accepted the terms of a battle she hadn't chosen, but which she now intended to win. Marcus Mercer's smirk faltered for the first time. He had expected tears, a panicked retreat, or at the very least, a stammered refusal. He had not expected this quiet, defiant composure. He had intended to make a fool of her, but her unnerving poise was beginning to make him feel like a bore. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, but he quickly masked it with a renewed air of arrogance. He gestured to the open floor with a magnanimous sweep of his hand, as if granting her a great privilege. "The stage is yours," he said, his voice a little too loud in the silent room. Maya ignored him. Her focus had turned inward, shutting out the gawking faces and the oppressive opulence of the room. She was closing a door on the world of service and opening one to a place she hadn't visited in a long, long time. Her mind was a whirlwind of memories, the scent of floor wax in her first dance studio, the feel of worn leather on her first pair of Tango shoes, the sound of her father's proud encouragement, and Marco's face, handsome and intense, as he led her through a complex figure, their bodies moving as one. A pang of old grief and betrayal shot through her, but she pushed it down. That was the past. This was now. She took a deep breath, letting it center her. Her shoulders, which had been perpetually hunched in a posture of deference, squared. Her spine lengthened, and her chin lifted. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. She was no longer a servant trying to make herself small. She was a performer, claiming her space. Her eyes lifted and found Mr. Romano at the piano. He had been watching the entire exchange, his hands resting on the ivory keys, his expression one of deep, empathetic curiosity. He was not one of them. He was a musician, an artist. He understood the sanctity of performance and the ugliness of what Marcus was attempting. In their shared gaze, a silent communication passed. She gave him the barest of nods, a flicker of an eyelash, a request, and a promise. Mr. Romano understood. He didn't need sheet music. He didn't need a request. He sensed the moment, the raw, unfolding drama before him, and he knew what it required. It did not need a flashy, upbeat show tune. It needed something with soul, with history, with a touch of sorrow and a core of defiance. His fingers, long and elegant, drifted over the keys. He began not with a melody, but with a single, haunting chord. It was a minor chord, low and resonant, that seemed to rise from the floorboards and fill the vast space of the ballroom. The note hung in the air, vibrating with a profound melancholy that instantly silenced the last vestiges of idle chatter. It was the sound of a story about to be told, a lament and a challenge all in one. Then, slowly, he began to play. It was Astor Piazzolla's Oblivion, a tango, yes, but not the fiery, aggressive tango of popular imagination. This was a tango nuevo, a piece steeped in longing, nostalgia, and a quiet, heartbreaking beauty. The melody unfolded, slow and deliberate, a walking bass line creating a pulse like a steady, sorrowful heartbeat. It was the music of memory, of loss, of a spirit that refuses to be extinguished. The choice of music was a stroke of genius. It denied Marcus the spectacle of a flashy, crowd-pleasing performance. It demanded introspection. It created a space of reverence, not ridicule. The crowd, which had been ready to mock a clumsy, amateurish attempt at a dance, was now disarmed, drawn into the music's somber, captivating embrace. As the first few bars of the piano filled the room, Maya closed her eyes. She let the music wash over her, let it find the dormant places in her soul. She could hear the bandoneon, the violin, the cello, even though they were not there. In her mind, the full orchestra was playing. The music was a key, unlocking a part of herself she had kept imprisoned for 5 years. She took her first step. It was not a dance step, but a simple, grounded placement of her foot on the polished parquet floor. Then another. She was not yet dancing, but feeling the floor, reacquainting herself with the foundation upon which she had once built her dreams. The awkward, sensible shoes of her uniform felt clumsy, wrong, but she would not let them hinder her. The dance was not in the shoes. It was in the soul. With the haunting melody as her guide, she raised her arms, not to an invisible partner, but to the music itself. Her hands, which had spent the evening carrying trays, now sculpted the air with a fluid grace. The crisis of choice was over. The humiliation was forgotten. The waitress was gone. In her place stood a dancer, poised on the edge of a performance that would be both an exorcism and a reclamation. As the mournful notes of oblivion filled the ballroom, Maya began to move. Her first steps were a slow, deliberate caminata, a tango walk. Her sensible work shoes made no sound on the floor, but the intensity of her movement created its own percussion. Each step was a liquid pour of weight from one foot to the other, her hips swaying in a subtle, controlled counterpoint to her upper body. It was the walk of a predator, of a queen, of a woman who owned the ground she walked on. The crowd watched, mesmerized. The woman they had seen moments before, the meek, invisible waitress, had vanished. In her place was a figure of mesmerizing power and grace. Her posture was impeccable, her spine a rigid, elegant line from which her limbs flowed with a startling fluidity. Her gaze was distant, fixed on a point in the middle distance, as if she were dancing with a memory, a ghost only she could see. Marcus Mercer stood frozen, his arrogant smirk completely gone, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of disbelief. This was not what he had orchestrated. He had expected a clumsy, embarrassing spectacle that would affirm his superiority. Instead, he was witnessing a metamorphosis, an act of genuine, breathtaking artistry that was completely out of his control. The power dynamic in the room had inverted. He was no longer the director of the show. He was just another member of the audience, and a small, insignificant one at that. Maya's body became a vessel for the music's story. As the piano's melody swelled with longing, her arms swept upwards, her hands carving delicate shapes in the air, fingers extended as if caressing an absent partner's face. She executed a slow, sinuous ocho, her feet tracing a figure 8 on the floor, her hips swiveling with a precision that was both hypnotic and deeply sensual. It was a movement of pure muscle memory, refined by thousands of hours of practice, now resurrected from its long slumber. She danced alone, but she did not look lonely. She was both leader and follower, question and answer. Her upper body remained still and poised, the famous tango torso, while her legs and feet told a story of passion, conflict, and release. She performed a gancho, her leg hooking sharply and momentarily around an invisible leg, a gesture of playful aggression. Then, a fluid giro, a series of smooth, rapid turns that made her simple black skirt flare around her, a fleeting echo of a proper tango dress. Mr. Romano, at the piano, watched her with tears welling in his eyes. He played with a newfound sensitivity, his fingers no longer just striking keys, but responding to her every move. He followed her rhythm, her pauses, her emotional crescendos. It was a duet, a conversation between musician and dancer, a collaboration of two artists who had found each other across a crowded, unseeing room. He softened the tempo when she held a pose, her body a sculpture of elegant tension, and added a touch of urgency when she moved into a faster sequence of footwork. The whispers in the crowd had long since died. The silence was absolute, reverent. People had forgotten their champagne, their conversations, their own self-importance. They were witnessing something raw and true, a soul laid bare through movement. A woman with a hardened, cynical expression, one of Marcus's own circle, unconsciously lifted a hand to her chest, her eyes wide with wonder. A gruff, elderly businessman, who hadn't been impressed by anything all night, leaned forward in his chair, captivated. Maya danced through the pain of her past. The memory of Marco's betrayal fueled a sharp, staccato footwork sequence, her feet tapping out a rhythm of anger and defiance. The sorrow of her mother's death flowed into a deep, lingering backbend. Her body, an arc of grief held in perfect, heartbreaking balance. But through it all, there was an undercurrent of resilience, of an unbreakable spirit. This was not a dance of defeat, it was a dance of survival. It was a declaration that even after the fire of life had burned her down, the embers of her passion still glowed, and could, with a single breath, be fanned back into a flame. As the music reached its melancholic climax, Maya executed her final movement. It was a simple, yet profoundly powerful pose. She stood in profile, one leg extended back, her arms reaching forward into the empty space where a partner should have been. Her head was thrown back, her throat exposed, her eyes closed. It was a pose of utter vulnerability and immense strength, of longing and of self-possession. She held it, perfectly still, as Mr. Romano played the final fading chord. The note hung in the air, echoing the first chord he had played, bringing the story full circle. For a suspended, breathless beat, the entire ballroom was frozen in time. There was only the image of the dancer, bathed in the golden light of the chandeliers, her heart, her history, and her art offered up for all to see. The ghost had become a fire. The final soft note from the piano evaporated into the vast, silent space of the ballroom. For a full 3 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the faint, collective sigh of 100 people breathing out at once. The image of Maya, frozen in her final, poignant pose, was seared into their minds. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated art, a lightning strike of truth in a room built on artifice. Then the spell broke. It started with a single person, not one of the wealthy socialites or powerful investors, but one of the other waiters, standing by the service entrance, who began to clap, his hands making a sharp, solitary sound. He was followed by Mr. Romano, who rose from his piano bench, his face etched with profound admiration, and added his own applause. Then, like a dam breaking, the sound erupted. The applause was not polite. It was not the gentle rhythmic clapping of a satisfied gala audience. It was thunderous, explosive, a roar of appreciation and awe that shook the crystal chandeliers. It was a visceral, emotional response to the courage and talent they had just witnessed. People were on their feet, their faces alight with an emotion Marcus Mercer had sought all night and failed to create. Genuine excitement. The room, which had been cold and sterile, was now filled with a palpable warmth, a shared human experience that transcended wealth and status. Maya slowly lowered her arms and brought her feet together. She opened her eyes, a little dazed, as if returning from a great distance. The roar of the applause washed over her, and for the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. Not triumph, not pride, but a quiet, overwhelmed gratitude. She had not danced for them, but for herself. Yet, their response was a balm on old wounds, a validation she hadn't known she needed. She did not curtsy or bow grandly. She simply offered a modest, dignified nod of her head, first to the audience, and then, with more meaning, to Mr. Romano at the piano. He nodded back, a silent acknowledgement of their shared masterpiece. Then, turning her back on the standing ovation, she did the most shocking thing of all. She walked back to the service stand, picked up her empty silver tray, and headed toward the kitchens. She returned to her job. The applause faltered, then died away, replaced by a ripple of stunned, excited whispers. The conversations that resumed were not about stocks or yachts. They were about her. Who was that? Did you see her footwork? Absolutely professional. I can't believe Marcus Mercer. What an oaf. He thought he was mocking her. The narrative of the evening had been stolen from its host. Marcus stood alone in the center of the floor, the epicenter of an event that was no longer about him. The laughter he had orchestrated had been transformed into applause for his intended victim. He had been rendered irrelevant, a footnote in the story of the waitress who could dance like a fallen angel. His face was a mask of pale, humiliated fury. He had been unmasked not by a rival or a market crash, but by a quiet woman with a hidden fire. He had tried to expose her as small, and in doing so had revealed his own pathetic pettiness to the entire room. As Maya pushed through the swinging doors into the bright, chaotic world of the hotel kitchen, the roar of the ballroom was replaced by the clatter of plates and the shouts of chefs. Her fellow servers stared at her, their expressions a mixture of awe and concern. "Maya, are you okay?" One of them, a kind girl named Sophia, asked. "We heard the commotion." "I'm fine," Maya said, her voice steady, though her hands were trembling slightly. She set her tray down on the metal counter. The simple, solid object felt real, grounding. Before she could process what had just happened, the ballroom door swung open again. A woman with an elegant silver bob and a chic, understated dress approached her. She was not one of Marcus's crowd. Her eyes held a keen intelligence and warmth. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice soft but clear. "My name is Ana Duarte. That was one of the most moving things I have ever seen." Maya, still reeling, could only manage a quiet, "Thank you." "I run a small dance studio in the village," Ana continued, handing Maya a simple business card. "Duarte Dance. We're nothing fancy like this," she said with a small smile. "But we have heart. I'm looking for a new tango instructor for our adult beginners class. The pay isn't much, but the students are wonderful. Please, think about it." Maya took the card. Its crisp edge, a tangible piece of a future she hadn't dared to imagine moments before. I will. Thank you." Ana nodded and slipped away as quietly as she had arrived. Maya stared at the card, the name Duarte Dance seeming to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights of the kitchen. A door had opened. A path, long overgrown, had been cleared. She looked down at her own hands. They were trembling, not from fear or humiliation, but from the thrum of life, the remembered feeling of the music flowing through her. The echo of the applause still rang in her ears, but it was Ana Duarte's quiet offer that resonated in her soul. It wasn't a proposal of marriage from a billionaire, but a simple job offer from a kindred spirit. And it was infinitely more valuable. The days that followed the gala were a study in contrasts. By day, Maya was still the quiet, efficient waitress at the St. Regis, her movements precise as she navigated the hotel's upscale restaurant. She continued to wear her simple black uniform, to keep her eyes downcast, and to answer to Waitress. She needed the job, the steady paycheck a non-negotiable reality of her life. Some of the hotel staff looked at her differently, with a new respect and a hint of awe. But Maya deflected their questions with a quiet modesty. The dance had been a moment out of time, a fever dream. Now it was back to the reality of making rent. But by evening, she was someone else entirely. After her first, nervous phone call, she had met Ana Duarte at the small, unassuming studio in Greenwich Village. It was nothing like the grand ballrooms she had once competed in. The space smelled of lemon-scented floor polish and honest sweat. The walls were lined with slightly fogged mirrors and posters of dance legends, the very same ones that had once adorned her bedroom walls. It felt, immediately and overwhelmingly, like coming home. Her first class was a motley crew of students. There was a young couple, clearly in love, who kept tripping over each other's feet and laughing. There was a retired accountant named Arthur, a widower who confessed that his late wife had always wanted to learn the tango. And there was a trio of college students who had seen a video of her dance from the gala, which had, to her horror, gone viral on social media. "Are you really her?" one of the students asked, her eyes wide. "The woman who danced for the billionaire?" Maya felt a flush of discomfort. "I just danced," she said simply. "That's all." Now, let's talk about the embrace. The tango is not about your arms. It is a conversation that begins with the chest. She poured herself into teaching. She found a deep, unexpected joy in guiding Arthur through his first hesitant steps, in seeing the young couple finally nail a basic ocho, in watching the student's initial awkwardness melt away into a budding confidence. She was helping them find what she had lost, a way to feel alive, to communicate without words, to find grace in their own bodies. She was not just teaching steps, she was teaching connection. By evening, she was not a waitress. She was a teacher, an artist. She was Maya. About a week after the gala, as she was polishing silverware after the lunch rush, a shadow fell over her table. She looked up and her heart seized. It was Marcus Mercer. He was dressed in an expensive, tailored suit, but he looked deeply uncomfortable, stripped of his usual entourage and arrogant swagger. He clutched a bouquet of roses so tightly his knuckles were white. They were the most expensive, long-stemmed roses money could buy, and they looked utterly ridiculous in the sterile environment of the restaurant. "Miss Park," he began, his voice stiff, "I believe I owe you an apology." Maya slowly placed the fork she was holding onto the linen cloth. She stood up, not out of deference, but to meet him at eye level. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her tone polite but cool. "That night, my behavior was uncalled for," he stammered, clearly unused to admitting fault. "It was a joke, a stupid dare. I never expected you to be a professional." "I'm not a professional," she corrected him quietly. "Not anymore." "Right. Well, regardless, it was magnificent. The whole city is talking about it." He thrust the roses at her. "Please accept these. And I'd like to make good on my proposal. Not the marriage part, obviously," he added with a nervous laugh. "That was just theater. But I want to help you. I could set you up. A benefactor. Your own studio. Anything you want. Consider it my way of making amends." Maya looked at the roses, then back at his face. She saw not malice, but a profound and pathetic incomprehension. He still thought this was a transaction. He believed her dignity was a commodity he could buy back with money and flowers after trying to strip it from her for sport. He was trying to reassert control, to become the benefactor of the talent he had failed to humiliate, thereby making her success part of his own story. She gave him a small, sad smile. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Mercer, but I have to decline." He was flabbergasted. "Decline? Why?" "This is a huge opportunity. I'm offering you a career." "I'm already building one," she said, her voice gaining a quiet strength. She thought of Arthur's proud smile, of the young couple's laughter. "And as for your apology, you didn't humiliate me that night. You revealed yourself. The only person you owe an apology to is yourself, for thinking that your power gives you the right to treat people like props in your own boring play." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her words were calm, precise, and they landed with the force of a physical blow. Marcus's face paled. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, his money and status had failed him. He was being dismissed, not with anger, but with a clarity that was far more cutting. "My worth isn't yours to validate," Maya said, her final words a quiet affirmation of the truth she had reclaimed on the dance floor. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." Without another glance at him or his expensive, meaningless roses, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the restaurant. She had faced her antagonist not with fury, but with a calm self-possession that was more powerful than any outburst. She didn't need him as a benefactor. She had found a different kind of partner, in Anna, in her students, and most importantly, in herself. The story of the waitress who danced at the St. Regis Gala became a quiet, persistent legend in the city. The viral video, grainy and shot on a phone, was dissected and shared, but it only captured a fraction of the magic. The true story lived in the whispers, in the way people talked about it. It wasn't a celebrity scandal or a piece of high society gossip. It was something more human, a modern fable about dignity and hidden talent. Maya Park became a symbol, not of overnight success, but of something far more profound, the enduring power of a person's inner light. She never quit her job at the hotel. To the surprise of many, she found a strange comfort in the routine, in the humility of the work. It kept her grounded, a constant reminder of where she had come from and the life she was carefully, deliberately building for herself. The work no longer felt demeaning because she knew it was not the sum of who she was. It was just a job. Her identity was no longer defined by her uniform, but by the life she lived outside of it. Her colleagues treated her with a quiet reverence, and even the hotel guests who recognized her seemed to look at her with a new respect. The ghost in the ballroom now had a face and a name. Her classes at Duarte Dance flourished. Anna, seeing Maya's incredible gift for teaching, gave her more hours. She started a children's class on Saturdays, a chaotic, joyful affair filled with giggling kids attempting their first tango steps. She taught retirees who wanted to reconnect with their bodies and stressed-out professionals who found an hour of focused, non-verbal communication to be the best therapy imaginable. She taught them that tango wasn't just about seduction or fancy footwork. It was about trust, balance, and listening to your partner. It was a metaphor for life. One evening, after a particularly rewarding class with her beginners, Arthur, the retired accountant, pulled her aside. His eyes, usually tinged with a quiet sadness, were bright. "My daughter came to visit this weekend," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I showed her the basic steps you taught me. We danced in my living room. For the first time since my wife passed, we danced." He squeezed Maya's hand. "Thank you." In that moment, Maya understood the true value of what she was doing. It was 1,000 times more meaningful than winning a competition or receiving a standing ovation from a room full of strangers. It was the quiet, profound impact of helping one person find a moment of connection and joy. This was her victory. This was her art. Months later, the St. Regis was hosting another grand charity gala. Maya was on the schedule, assigned to her usual duties. As she prepared for her shift, tying the ribbon of her apron, she caught her reflection in the polished silver of a champagne bucket. She saw her own eyes looking back, and this time, they were not empty or guarded. They were clear and calm, filled with a quiet confidence. She walked into the same ballroom, under the same crystal chandeliers. The scene was identical. The tuxedos, the gowns, the scent of lilies and money. But for Maya, everything was different. The room no longer felt oppressive or alien. It was just a room. The people were just people. Their power, their status, their judgment. It had no hold on her. As she moved through the crowd with her tray, she walked taller. Her steps were still measured and efficient, but they held the ghost of a tango walk, a subtle, ingrained grace that now came not from buried memory, but from present-day practice. She was Maya Park, a waitress, and she was Maya Park, a dancer and a teacher. The two were not in conflict. They were simply different facets of a whole, resilient person. Her light was not, and had never been, defined by their laughter or their applause. It had been there all along, an ember waiting for the courage to draw in a breath and glow again. The dare had not created her. It had only revealed what was already inside. And now, walking through the glittering ballroom, a quiet smile on her lips, she knew that light was hers to command, a steady, warm flame that no one could ever extinguish again. That single dance changed everything, not by giving Maya a fairy tale ending, but by allowing her to write her own. She discovered that true wealth isn't about status or applause. It's about the quiet dignity of a life filled with purpose. Her story reminds us that there is incredible strength hidden inside all of us, waiting for the right moment to step onto the floor. If her journey from humiliation to quiet triumph moved you, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about the hidden heroes who walk among us. Your support helps us continue to tell stories that matter. Thank you for watching.